Hello.
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 Hello. Every time I join, I forget to click that recording box and I try to unmute. And it's like, why is it not unmuting?
Oh, the like, hey, you're being recorded thing?
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't click on OK there, then you cannot unmute yourself. And I'm like, why is this button not working?
Interesting. Well, that's a good thing, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a design decision.
You're even wearing the shirt today, Sertaj. Did you like you're in uniform?
Yeah, I usually pick my OPA shirts for the Gatekeeper days. I think Rita is joining in a minute. Yeah, looks like she's having issues with Zoom. Should we start while we are waiting for Rita? Looks like she's having issues with her Zoom.
Yeah, I guess one thing, if people have topics, add them to the meeting notes doc so we know to make time for them. But in the interim, we can start looking at stale PRs. I also see some new faces. So did we want to just say hi to people?
I can do it.
Welcome, first of all.
Hello. Hi. Hey, I'm Nilik. I work at Microsoft and I have been a consumer of Gatekeeper at my previous job. So kind of familiar with the concept and with just talking with Sartash around, what's going on and what we have been doing. And I think one of the interesting stuff that came up was the work that we are proposing around the Gatekeeper library. So I was kind of hoping, if there is something I can contribute to and help drive some of the things. That's it for me.
Welcome, Nilik.
Hey.
Yeah, good to meet you.
Yeah, I think Nilik was interested in the library reorganization work, and hopefully make a nicer front end for our library repo, so it can have like categories and filtering, easier to digest for the end users.
Cool. Anyone else want to introduce themselves? No pressure if you don't.
Jeremy, I was here last time, I think, but I'm also at Microsoft. Also previously a consumer of Gatekeeper.
Nice.
I'm Xander. I think I've been on this call before once or twice, but yeah, I'm the PM for Sertaj Nilik and Jeremy's team at Microsoft.
Oh wow, we're outnumbered. It's good to see y'all. Yeah, what capacity were you using Gatekeeper in, if I might ask?
Yeah, so for me, like what we were essentially like a central cloud team at my previous work, and we used to have a lot of Kubernetes clusters, and I sort of pioneered or helped get Gatekeeper implemented to all of our clusters. And by the time I was leaving, the cluster count was around 60, I would say. And some of the scenarios that we were tracking is just, since it's a centralized team or the centralized, what we can say, a platform that most of our internal teams were using, we wanted to know, hey, who is first of all on our platform, who is consuming what kind of resources, is there a way we can add some policies if they don't add certain attributes and things like that. So yeah, we implemented like a few of those scenarios, write some custom regos at the time. Mostly, I mean, the most I remember what we did around at the time was around ingress controllers, because that's where a lot of app teams were making mistakes. So we added some kind of a validation over there, so as to fail them and let user know with the proper message, hey, you need to add this kind of annotations and things like that.
Similar for me. Previous job was at a company that makes phones and stuff, starts with an A. We ran a lot of Kubernetes clusters, and we were using Gatekeeper for policy enforcement reasons. And then previous to that, at VMware, we ran a lot of Kubernetes clusters in AWS for like the SaaS services that VMware is running. And originally we're using OPA, not Gatekeeper, but with queue management stuff, and then migrated to Gatekeeper.
Cool. And not to, if we are out of time, let me know, but what was the impetus for moving from the queue management to the Gatekeeper approach?
I don't remember why we did. I think we wanted to just consolidate. Some other teams were already using that, so having one set of things, I think, was the driving reason behind that. Less things to manage in the cluster.
Gotcha. So it wasn't like a usage gap or something like that.
For me, one of the capability that I was sort of interested at the time was the auditing. So I've been following Gatekeeper even before it was named Gatekeeper. I guess I think it was named something different. And one of the feature that it had was an auditing part of it. So that was one of the driving factor for us. So we had like an internal custom UI for our internal teams to deploy and whatnot. So we would wanted to surface all these policy informations to the users so that they can know.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing the background. I appreciate it. Did we want to do issue backlog?
Yeah, sounds good to me. Anybody wants to drive? Also, we got the stale bot active, so maybe we could also look at the won't fix ones.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest, should we look at those first since they will get closed first?
So some have already been closed. Are we looking right or no? Has stuff just been? I noticed there's been like 100+ emails.
Yeah, so they get labeled as won't fix. I did change them to stale though. So in 14 days they're going to be closed. So they're not closed yet.
Gotcha.
These are currently active issues, open issues.
But to be closed in 14 days.
I almost wonder if triage is obsolete then, because we won't be able to get through all 100 emails or all 100 bugs or whatever that have been labeled in the past few days. Do we want to like tweak it to see if someone has issues that they thought were interesting that they wanted to raise or something like that, and just trust the other ones will go away? Old issues that were interesting,
I mean, the hundreds are probably just right now because like we just turn it on, right? Like over time, they should be less.
Yeah. So
it's actually the ones that no one comments on that we should look at, because if they commented on it, the label would be removed. In which case, would not close it in 14 days. It's the ones that have the label that no one had touched in 14 days will be closed.
That's
right. Sorry, go ahead.
I just said that's right. I think we can just look at the label won't fix, because if they have a comment, then it's going to be removed anyway, hopefully.
Right. So my meta point though is this like bug closing thing, is that the automated bug closing, is that meant to take the place of this triage? If so, should we be doing it? Or what's the new
It's to assist, not to replace. I don't think that bot can replace, right? Because it's to assist us and prioritize things. But it can't just replace triage.
Well, okay, of new issues for sure, right? But of old issues, which is sort of what we're looking at, and we're going through the backlog here. Like, why would we do the bot if we don't trust the bot to close issues that no one's interested in? And two, if we do trust the bot to close issues that no one's interested in, there's kind of like two modes here, right? There's the current mode where there's so many issues, we are not going to get through this backlog in this meeting before some of those get auto closed, right? Because I think at best we maybe could do 10, right? So that's a couple. that's weeks of these. And the second is when we do hit that steady state, right, where things are dropping off at a more manageable pace. What do we want to do then, right? Like, is it just the assumption that we'll have been able to have triaged only new issues at that point.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, because then, I mean, if we let the bot do its thing, and then users that still need the issues, they'll comment on it, so it'll keep open, right? Hopefully. And if they don't, then it'll get closed. If somebody else needs that, they can reopen the issue or create a new one, and we can keep triaging the older ones.
When you say the older ones, you mean the ones that haven't been commented on, or so
either doesn't have label, or it be like anything that happened after it got closed.
anything that happens after.
So like any, I guess, sort of like the least recently updated issues that doesn't have a tag, the won't fix tag, the stale tag.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so to stay ahead of the bot is
exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
So we triage them so the bot doesn't get a chance to comment on it, and if it does, then it'll close those.
Right. That's why it should assist us, not replace us.
Well, no, so it's if okay, so we would not have a backlog, right? If we had the capacity to just like auto curate this stuff, or sorry, manually curate this stuff. So there's something about auto closing where it is doing stuff that honestly we can't do, right? And is replacing hours that we don't have. So like, how do we leverage that? Like my initial intuition is that, you know, at least now we're getting emails of like, hey, this issue has been like super stale and we're gonna close it. Do you care? And I don't know about everyone else, but I am like reading those emails. I have a backlog now, but you know, and you know, if I notice something, and I haven't yet, but if I notice something where I'm like, oh no, we really don't want to like let that drop off.
Well, in the ideal world, right, we wouldn't have so many, and things that are stale should be small enough that would help us prioritize and review them first, or sorry, triage them first. So either we remove the label or we just let the bot close it for us, right? The problem right now is we have too many of these.
Right. I mean, I feel like we're talking in circles, because the reason we have too many of them is because we haven't closed them, right? Like the bot, if all it's doing is taking over someone manually clicking the close button, right? And we still are taking it on ourselves to like actively analyze issues that have sort of dropped off the face of the earth because no one's felt like commenting on them. And the bot commenting saying, hey, we're going to close this, doesn't like spur comment saying like, no, don't step on my thing, right? Which I think is the real value here, right? It re-stirs signal. Then we're not kind of getting the benefit of only putting our attention to things that are going concerns, right? That have some sort of active request.
So do you have any suggestions?
So yes, I mean, my initial suggestion was we could use that signal of if anyone has commented on these issues that were going to be closed. That's a signal that we should revisit because we know there's still an active audience, as well as just for ourselves, if we take it on ourselves to like notice issues that are going to be closed, and if any one of us like cares that they're going to be closed, that's another reason to triage them, or like re-triage them, I guess, because triage is more about the input than the tail.
So you're saying, Max, look at the stale bot PRs? Sorry, the
Yeah.
labeled ones?
Look at them if, yeah, I'm saying outside of this meeting, right? We should probably be paying attention to this stuff
Right.
ourselves, right? And so if we notice anything, like I see Rita in the meeting notes is referencing a bug that's marked stale, you know, that's one signal that we could use, right? And that's high bandwidth, non-coordinated. And another is because this also sends a ping out to anyone who's ever subscribed to that issue, right? The original opener or any commenter, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. So I think you're saying like we do this asyncly on our own, and if there are things that we think we should pay attention to, then we comment in it, which will remove the label, and then we can say it's triaged. Is that right?
Well, less nuance than that. Just if someone, the async bit would just be to signal interest in rediscussing, right? Because it's the discussion that's expensive, because we only have an hour of this a week, and it's everyone here's time focused on it.
Sure. Then the assumption here is that all of us would dedicate some time, at least like in the next 14 days or less than that, to go look at the won't fix or stale label items to make sure the valid ones are not part of that list, right?
Yeah, which I mean is the alternative, that we do that all in these meetings. If so, we'll need to like schedule more meetings, and it's the same amount of time, maybe more, because discussion, right?
Yeah, that's fair. Well, okay, maybe how many are these right now? Let me just see.
Is there a way to do the? Oh
So
yeah, you could just
135.
The won't fix label?
Yeah, 135. So I guess that's between what, the three of us? Should we divide
well,
and
each of us
conquer?
would read all 135, right? Like it doesn't need to be an in-depth read, like whatever you're comfortable with. If you see the title and you're like, oh, obviously not.
Or if you're not sure,
just
bump
leave it. Yeah.
Wait, if you're not sure, you should bump it, right?
What do you mean bump it?
Like say like update it so that it doesn't get closed, or remove the label.
Fine to just leave it, right? Then it's just going to get closed, and the author will comment.
Yeah, the idea is like just looking for signal of, is anyone interested in this, right?
It's
so and
picking up the ones that we want to keep. Not
so
that's fair.
And yeah, people can use whatever threshold they feel like for interesting.
So only remove label if you think we should keep. That's fair.
Yeah,
sounds pretty good.
Yeah, or even if you just want some discussion around whether we should keep it.
Okay.
All right. Well, I mean, did we want to do any of these manually today, or we're almost at the half hour? PRs also was on the list.
I'm okay going to the rest of the agenda.
Yeah. I think we want to finish up the agenda.
Sorry for eating that up with the meta discussion, but I
expected nothing less.
Well, I didn't. I just knew we wouldn't get through it otherwise, right?
That's fair. Yeah. Sertaj, did you want to?
Oh,
sorry. Or are we looking at PRs? I don't
know. Do we have any stale PRs? I mean, or the bot will also apply to PRs, by the way. It's just we didn't have that old PRs.
Okay.
So we could also just let the bot do its thing with PRs. We don't have to look at it.
Okay, that's fine.
Oh, there's the Q depth one.
Yeah, that's Oren's old one. I am working on rebasing that.
Oh, gotcha. It wasn't excuse me, it wasn't a trivial rebase.
No, yeah, because we added a lot of stuff.
Gotcha.
I initially thought it was a trivial rebase.
Surprise.
Yes. Yeah, if you're going through the agenda, then I think we got a survey that Jeremy added us as like a pilot. Let me drop the link. I thought I did actually. This is the link for the survey. I think this is also in the maintainers chat, by the way. How do we want to answer these questions? Do you want to talk about it in the community call, or do you want to talk about it in Slack? The deadline is August 5, so in a week, on Friday, next week. And it sounds like the idea is after the pilot projects, it's going to be rolled out to all CNCF projects.
Yeah, that's the intent. This is from the supply chain security working group from CNCF security tag. And it's really about trying to identify the areas that CNCF projects are lacking in terms of like the recommendations that the security tag has made around supply chain security, and trying to identify places where the working group or the tag might be able to make recommendations or help folks achieve better supply chain security for their projects.
I think one thing I noticed about the questions is how I would answer as the project may be different from how I would answer as like from my organization.
Yeah, I think
Is
that's
that-
a valid assessment of it.
So when we fill this out on behalf of like the gatekeeper projects, we should be responding on behalf of the project, right?
Like I think it should be the gatekeeper hat is on and
Okay.
responding that way.
Right. The OSS project, not organizational.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, might be good to clarify that. I mean, do we want to just take a stab at it and then work on it asyncly, or do we want to use this time for this?
I think. Okay.
Go ahead, Max.
Oh, I don't know how we want to divide up the initial answers, but like initial answers and like comments on the doc is probably the easiest, like async.
Yeah, that sounds okay. So let's, I guess, do this async. So one of us can fill out the form and then we can circle back like before August 5th. Maybe we can check progress on it next week.
Yeah, and we could resolve probably in chat, like who fills out the form or which parts of the form. That's the only thing is we want to make sure every question has an owner, whatever form that takes.
Mhm.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I can take a stab at it, and then we can like fill in the blanks or add, remove anything.
Yeah, the only security incident I'm aware of with supply chain would have been, remember that password thing? I forget what, this is like years ago at this point. We needed to change our CI/CD, or we needed to change our Docker passwords because like some CI/CD tool leaked them due to like them.
the code
Right.
cuff thing. Was that a code cuff?
I think so. Yeah, that
Yeah, that
sounds.
wasn't a concern for us because we were never provide. Oh, we did actually, yeah, because they were part of the environment variables, and yeah, then because of code cov, that might have gotten leaked. Yeah.
Gotcha. But I don't think we were like impacted. I think we just changed passwords.
Yeah, we had to rotate the passwords, but yeah. So now we changed it so that only that pipeline doesn't have, sorry, that job doesn't have access to any of the any permissions basically to be able to do stuff.
Gotcha.
What motivates you to secure your pipeline? Hype.
I mean, that is very true. Cool. So I'll take the action item to fill this out.
Cool. Thank you.
Before next meeting. And then we can discuss a thing in check progress next meeting.
Sounds good.
Teresa, do you want to go for the next one?
Yes. Okay. So I was thinking about I guess like one of the things I was trying to think about is how can we support other languages as well as distribution of policies better. And one thought was like kind of what this issue was suggesting, right? Is much like how Rego policies can be distributed via OCI. Is this something that we Gatekeeper will want to update so that we could potentially package the Regos as OCI artifacts? If you click on that link, I believe there were some initial discussions here. And I think one of the pushbacks from Max was the network connectivity or availability could be a concern in terms of, you know, if there's no network access, then there's no policies, I guess.
Yeah, specifically shift left, right? Or shift right. On Kubernetes, it's probably less of a concern, but build pipelines, software supply chain security, you may not want them reaching out to the wider internet.
But let's say not so much the internet, but just like a registry, right? That a trusted registry. I think that could be a benefit to organizations who want to sort of use the registry as the delivery mechanism. Obviously, it's not one-to-one in terms of, you know, Regos to constraint templates. So that's where it gets interesting, in that we would have to basically take down the Regos, convert them to constraint template, and then the framework will know, like, you know, will do its thing, right? Even though OPA already can do this.
Yeah, so I think there are two ways to discuss this, right? There's the bug as written, right, and take it at face value, in which case there's probably a lot more barriers that I could think of on my end, just in terms of like orchestration and you know, when do you do the poll and blah blah blah. Or if we take sort of the meta note of the bug, right? That I don't know, like so also a bit of how you put it in the notes is kind of incongruous with what the bug is, right? Because how I read that bug is they specifically want to package Rego and pull it in.
Right.
Whereas how you just talked about it.
Whereas I'm talking about it like today is Rego, but tomorrow could be other languages. Yeah.
Yeah, and also yeah, well, that bit, and also sort of the modes you want to support, right? The packaging. It sounds like it's more about like how these things are made available versus like the granularity with which they're made available, right? And so, some flexibility I could see there. This doesn't address multi-language, but if you threw some constraints and templates and an OCI and we're able to read from that, one thing that would address multi-language but has a harder execution pathway, maybe in terms of like you don't want to run it in like a single bash command or something, would be if you modified a constraint template to have as its source a container image that was an executable container image, right? And that raises like Docker and Docker concerns and so forth. But if you could reference some kind of executable and define an interface or a protocol saying like, hey, we're going to shove this data into you, right? And we expect this data out of you. Right, and we'll convert that to a decision. That would be very readily language neutral, but then raises questions. I said execution, but also cache data, right? How do you expose the cache if you want to do referential type constraints? But yeah, so I think there's a lot of play here. I also don't think the network connectivity thing is a killer objection, because they're already like external data, for instance, right?
Yeah,
relies
exactly.
on network connectivity.
Yep.
And you don't have to use this. I mean, we're not saying this is the only way, right? So if it's the network connectivity is important to an organization, they can just use the Rego as is.
Well, sure. But then the question becomes, how do you go ahead?
Sorry, go ahead, get finished.
Oh, the question would be like, if that's true practically or not, right? Like, if this becomes just the default way Rego is always embedded, for instance, then it's going to become hard for people with that constraint to like pull templates from the library. Sorry, I'm using constraint in a different way. People with that requirement or limitation to pull templates from the library. Yeah, my answer changes, or the salience, I think, of that concern changes depending on basically the ubiquity of the choice. And if it's used as part of the standard build pipeline and we integrate it in the library, that's very ubiquitous, right?
It also has with the library with the versioning. So say we create an OCI artifact, then we can version that, versus today in the library, we don't have versioning.
Right, and like bundling a bunch of templates, like if the container wraps templates entirely versus templates pull containers, like that's like manifestly fine, right? That's just another way of shoving YAML around. And there's plenty of ways to pipeline YAML and kind of exists outside of Gatekeeper, right? Like you could imagine you just pull the image prior to calling the Gator CLI, for instance.
Well, just to clarify, right? Like I think we're kind of jumping around on like maybe two ideas right now. One is like, how do we use OCI for the Regos, right? Which a lot of different projects, including OPA, already uses, right? And then there's the, what about constraint templates? Like, how do we, is that like a place we could potentially distribute gatekeeper policies via OCI? I don't know, but I don't know if you guys are talking about the same things here, because if you look at the gatekeeper library, that's completely all about constraint templates and constraints, right?
Oh yeah, I was thinking about just the Rego being an OCI artifact. So instead of like putting the Rego inside a inside a template, we could do, I don't know, OCI in basically reference to it, version
Okay.
1.0, whatever.
Yeah,
Can
I
also-
don't like.
You see, you guys are
sorry.
talking about two different things.
Okay,
Yeah,
I see.
Yeah. I guess like I don't mind talking about either one as long as we're talking about the same things here. And originally, when I brought this up, I was thinking about the Rego aspect of it because that's proven, it's already done, and people are using that as a mechanism for distributing Regos, right? So if
Well,
possible, would be good to reuse that mechanism as part of the constraint templates.
So I strongly disagree with that statement as it's a proven mechanism because constraints are very different from raw OPA, right?
Yeah,
When
I
they're-
know, I know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm saying it's a proven distributed mechanism for Regos.
Even so, templates are not
I wasn't talking
standard
about
Rego.
templates. I wasn't talking about templates.
Right. Well, you're talking about the Rego
Rego.
template.
Yeah, I'm
Right,
talking
you're
about
saying-
the Rego.
Just Rego.
Yeah, you're
Just
saying
the
the
Rego.
template would pull the Rego from a container, right? So I think I understood
What do you mean
said.
by what do you mean by from a container?
So the OCI image, the
The OCI artifact. It's just an artifact.
Okay, whatever tar.gz file, kind of
Right, whatever, yeah.
something that gets pulled from the internet.
Right.
The template pulls in Rego source rather than the Rego source being wrapped
That's right.
in the template.
Mhm.
That's one. There's I don't think the OPA history of using it is directly analogous because OPA just like takes straight Rego and
Right.
dumps it into OPA,
Yep,
right?
yep,
Which is a
yep.
very
Yeah, we know this, yeah.
yeah. And the other half of it is aside from the, as I said, the packaging and ubiquity concerns, right? Which if we did this in the library, right, if we wrote our templates like this, would be an issue for the network limitations. And still another angle for this is divergence, right? So if you're pulling in Rego elsewhere, and it's kind of like keeping your C++ header files a few miles away from your C++ code, right? Because the templates are defining the schema for the parameters, right?
Mhm.
And so, you know, I that's why I sort of wanted to steer it toward like, what are the actual requirements here? Because like, if it's purely about distribution, I think there's probably better ways of handling this, particularly if it's about like Rego code reuse for libraries. If distribution of the Rego code, excuse me. If it's about ways of shipping policy around, right? Or about ways of being language neutral because it's wrapped in a Docker container, right? Then there's other ways of maybe packaging this that make more sense. So like, is it just OCI? We should use OCI, or are there actual like requirements that and needs people are looking
one
for?
reason why people are saying OCI is because both Rego and Wasm packages are currently distributable via OCI.
Right. So, and there we could distribute the template library via OCI, right? If it's about policy being distributable via OCI, right? Because
Yeah,
in
but
OpenLand,
constraint
Rego
templates
is
currently
policy.
doesn't work with it, right?
Well, so in OpenLand, the Rego is both template and constraint, right? It's like the fully realized policy that they're distributing via OCI. So the sort of gatekeeper analog would be to wrap your config in an OCI container. Versus if you're just wrapping the Rego that's you're packaging Rego, but you're not packaging a policy, right? You still need to ship the template separately. You still need to define the constraints separately.
Yeah, I think in this idea, it would just be the Rego in OCI. Like the constraint would be a separate thing. It would not ship with it because we would have to like customize it, like it's a Kubernetes object.
Right, and that's the issue as stated, right? In the in the issue we're citing for this discussion, but again, that's not how Rita couched it. And Rita, you're the one who like highlighted this issue as interesting. So and no one's responded to this issue, right? So I'm sort of viewing you as the person who's still interested in this.
Yeah.
So my question is like, what is interesting about it to you, right? Like what feature gap are you looking to bridge here?
So what prompted this is one is I think other OPA users have been using OCI as the distribution mechanism for Rego. Like, so that's the first thing. So I've heard users who say like, hey, would be great if we could just, use that and it just magically works with Gatekeeper. So that's similar to what this is what they're asking.
Like Rego that they would plug into OPA, or Rego that is written for templates?
For templates, I think, because Rego as it's as the way that people are distributing, it wouldn't just work with constrained templates, right? Right.
Yeah.
So,
but but then like, what? Why would they be looking for that then, unless they were using the OPA model already and wanted to continue using it?
That's the case. That's the case.
Okay,
right?
so
That's the world that they're familiar with, and they will like to reuse their old Rego that's been distributed that way via OCI, and they want to be able to just plug and play without having to do too much work.
So is there issue with the plug and play, the fact that they need to refactor the code, or that the packaging model is different?
I mean, I'm reading this guy's, he opened the issue, right? So I'm guessing it's both. Like one is, then they can continue to use whatever they're used to today, right? So that they don't have to rewrite things potentially.
I think also that the packaging has other advantages, as they pointed out by the issue, right? Like assigning is one of them, and also if you wanted to do something else other than Rego, we would also have the packaging already there with the OCI artifacts.
Like if you expand his example constraint template, that's sort of what he's suggesting, right? Is a way to kind of call out and grab the Rego, and it would just magically work.
I get that. Like, the one thing is the Rego wouldn't magically work.
I know.
Right?
I mean, that's what this discussion is about, right? Yeah. If it works, then we wouldn't even,
Well, I mean, if we said that, let's just write what is suggested in the issue, right? And they put in Rego that would work with ConfTest or OPA. It's still not going to do what they wanted, right? Because the interface between Rego and the enforcement point is different in all of these, right? ConfTest sort of defines its own interface, and then OPA talks directly to K8s. So there's some amount of refactoring regardless, right?
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
And then there's the parameterization bit, right? Like if you're someone who's just like, I don't want to write constraints because I don't want to parameterize my policy, I just want to shove Rego into something that will then be enforced. I'm sensitive to that desire, right? Like particularly if you're a smaller shop and the person defining generalized policies is the same person as is writing the specific ones, then that abstraction adds less value than if you're like a larger corporation that has centralized policy teams, or you're relying on the policy library or something like that. And you know, maybe there's something we could do for people there. But that doesn't look like this necessarily, right? Packaging of Rego would be an important discussion there, but it wouldn't be putting it in a template. If we're talking about signing, the benefits of signing, you get those no matter what the granularity, right? If you put a cluster of templates and constraints into an OCI image, that image can be signed just as well as putting a set of Rego in a image, and arguably is better because you're signing the entire policy versus just the Rego source.
But how do you get it out? Like, how do you get the templates and the constraints
Right,
out?
and
so we will
yeah,
write a tool basically to be able to, like, I don't know, Gator, deploy, and then you give that OCI artifact, and it would have to unwrap everything basically.
Right. Yes. And another like interesting thing to explore would be putting policies that don't live on the API server, right? And that could look like reading from disk, which would allow like platform providers to provide immutable policy, and also could provide, you know, it doesn't have to just be disk as the data source. You could point it at an OCI image, it could read it, sign it, watch the registry, whatever. Essentially the equivalent to what bundles in OPA does today. And that would be just a different mode of deploying policy that doesn't use the API server as an intermediary. Or you could come up with like a sidecar process that reads these bundles, validates the signature, pushes them to the cluster, right? And that looks kind of like Argo CD or one of those projects. So
it almost sounds like you're kind of suggesting like constraint templates and constraints as an OCI artifact. Is that right?
I think that's a model. I've struggled to say suggesting because I don't know quite necessarily what the need is.
Okay.
But yeah, how do you customize it in that case, right? How do you customize a constraint?
Right. So, and there we could talk about granularity, right? Is it we want to like put the library in an OCI bundle so you could like gather the library, but then you write the constraints later, or do you want to put everything in the library? And yeah, it's less customizable, but you're also building your OCI library, right?
Or you could do what like Helm does, which is you point to the package, the chart somewhere, and then you can replace the values.
That's fair. Yeah, like a templatized kind of thing.
Yeah. Like
or
Helm, like Gator, but yeah, we could use Gator for this.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It would be like Gator deploy and then like an OCI.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah.
I'm down like for that.
Two OCI images, one for the library, one for the constraints.
Yeah. I think in most cases, I mean, it sounds like most the cases are about the constraint templates because that's like where it's centralized. Whereas like the constraints is like, I mean, you can provide the value whenever, right? And again, it would give us the centralized thing. It would give us the signing, right? It will give us the versioning, right? And a very, really consistent user experience, actually.
Yeah. And all of those I have no objection to. Anything like inside the template, I get a little sort of confused as to the relative benefits. It seems like, yeah.
I mean, the benefit would be, say, I want to swap out like Rego with WASM tomorrow, right? Or
yeah,
WASM,
that was sort of the initial thought, but I agree. There's no good translation today, right? That's the thing. If it were easy to kind of take the Rego and easily plug the parameters and all the, I don't know, the Kubernetes object, logic in there, then that will be beautiful. But obviously we're not standardized enough to do that today.
Yeah. Oh, and swapping out Rego with WASM, like there I would look to the template library building stuff, right? And there's a couple of pathways there. One is like and yes, the template library is under-realized in terms of the build pipeline for the Rego. But you could point, right now it's pointing to Rego source, each template. Just point it to WASM source. Another thing could be you could keep both sources in a template for a period of time for transition, right?
So,
like, okay.
So can we entertain this WASM idea just for a bit? Like, if we were to do that, we would have to convert that, like the framework would have to convert this so that OPA would understand it. How does it even work? How would it even work?
I mean, I think OPA directly understands WASM, right?
Right, but
no,
constraint template doesn't.
OPA can compile to WASM, is my understanding. Like it can compile.
Policies
Rego.
can.
I
Yeah,
see.
the policies can.
So I guess also like why WASM? Like there could be a couple of whys. That's not a like. Would you want? Sorry. Why would you want WASM? It's more about.
What's the use case here?
Yeah, like, are you trying to run the constraint framework in something that only understands WASM? Are you trying to put WASM into constraint templates? If the second, is that so that you can just have WASM as a compilation target, so you could use different languages for your source? What's the...
I was thinking, like, long term, if you think about the framework, I was actually thinking like targets, we have target Rego today, right? Imagine tomorrow we have like not Rego, but something else, right? And then this could be the WASM, like whatever language you use can compile into WASM. And that could be Regos, that could be Cell, that could be whatever, right?
Gotcha.
And then the constraint template would understand, or like it would have to be able to translate what that WASM package is, that bundle is trying to do, and then send it to the right rule engine, right? If it's Rego, it sends it to OPA, right? If it's Cell, it will send it to Cell's evaluator. Does that make sense?
The WASM engine would, or the...
No, depending on the language within the bundle.
Oh gosh.
Like WASM is just a package thing, right?
Like a sibling to Rego, Cell, SQL, whatever.
It's just a language agnostic package, right? Within it, it could be Rego still, but it could also be other languages, right? Right now, the way we have today is very specific to Rego, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, and once it's WASM, right? Like, maybe you could figure out what it was, but that's kind of in terms of execution.
But I do think, isn't it kind of important that you figure out what it is, because then the framework can decide which engine to send it to?
If it's Rego source, if it's Python source or whatever, yes, because then you need to send it to OPA or whatever Python interpreter. I don't know if there's a Go Python.
Right.
Probably. And then if it's WASM, then you send it to the WASM executor, and that's not going to be language specific. But what it would have to look like, and forgive me, I have a very rough understanding of WASM, but we would need to provide an interface, right? Saying when we call WASM, we're going to call this call point, provide this data with this structure, and we expect this response back, right? And whoever is writing stuff that compiles to WASM would need to write against that interface.
That's right.
Once it's WASM, then as long as it can be packaged in the constraint template, which I guess base 64 encoded, then yeah, you just need to call whatever WASM engine, and you only need the one.
Right, which the again the constraint in the constraint templates world, we would still need to somehow translate or connect the parameter stuff somehow.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why I was thinking, like, earlier you said, oh, I don't know about actually putting it inside of the template. But I think if you want to support multiple languages, I think this is a possibility here. And in order to do that, the template would have to translate or connect the parameters somehow. And and since WASM, since Rego can be compiled as a WASM runtime binary, that's why I thought if we could make the WASM Rego OPA thing work, then we could prove it out that it will work for other languages.
Right, and so what I would say there, like, and I have zero pushback against constraint templates being able to interpret WASM.
Okay.
To be clear,
okay.
Like no conceptual issues. So what I hear roughly when you say that is a shape where you have some Rego, right? And you use Rego's tool to compile that Rego to WASM.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've written that Rego against this interface that we've.
I think that's how OPA, when OPA says we support WASM, that's what they mean. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And it might be that at that point you would just like maybe you don't even need to change the Rego. I don't know. We'd need to define the WASM interpreter, or maybe there's like
right.
shim.
And then we have to figure out how does the framework pass in the parameter information, I guess.
Right, which would be part of that protocol, I think, for WASM. But then, like, we would still, for backwards compatibility reasons, read raw Rego, right? Like, that's not getting out of constraint templates. So as a user, honestly, my first question would be, which one's faster? Between the two, that one.
I mean, I think at this point it's less about WASM's performance gain. It's more about WASM being used as the language agnostic thing.
Right. Yeah. And in my view, WASM as an interpreter is fine. It may be that you want other interpreters sibling to that, right? Like WASM is a sibling to the OPA interpreter. Again, let's use Go Python, pretending that's a thing, could be another sibling. Right. And it's not that people would be forced to use one or the other. It's just if for whatever reason they want the text in the clear, or the various interpreters have various advantages like speed or something, or just one doesn't compile to WASM, but they still want to use the language, then that would be what people would use.
Okay, so it sounds like you are also open to this idea. Like, so we talked about two different ideas, right? One is how do we, make constraint templates into like an OCI kind of thing where it's easier to pull down things and manage versioning, right? So that's one idea, and it sounds like folks are in favor of it. And then another idea is how do we swap out the Rego specific thing today and replace it with something potentially like a WASM bundle that can that will need to go through some WASM interpreter and the framework will need to be able to connect the parameter piece and then pass it down to the rule engine of choice.
Yeah, like to my, that's just multi-engine constraint templates.
Yep.
WASM as an engine.
Right. So it sounds like folks are in favor of the second one as well, right? Okay, cool. That's all I wanted to discuss today.
Gotcha. That's a good discussion. I
haven't had a live
in a while. Yeah.
I mean, at first it was like, whoa, there's this old issue. Like, what is this still doing here? But it's actually, I think it's a good way to get us into like thinking about the problem a little bit.
Yeah. And as written, like, I think it identifies a need, like just to go full
I will
circle.
try to
as
capture.
written. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to capture this discussion and I'll put in a comment so that it doesn't close out. I still think it's valuable to keep the original request around just to make sure we come back and say, did it actually solve this guy's problem?
Gotcha. And so and when you say comment on it, you mean
Mhm.
like those two branches you said of the packaging?
Yes, that's
or
right.
Gotcha.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Because I
Yeah.
think what this issue as stated right now is neither of the two, to be honest, right? But I think the two ideas came from it. And I think it might be good to also get his feedback. Like, does this actually solve your use case?
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't commented on it in a while, so I don't know if he's still interested, but yeah.
Okay, cool, thank you. And we're a little bit over, so.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.